Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we are starting a brand new fanfiction story called, What If Naruto Was the Ruler of Makai and Built a Harem with Kushina and Hinata? This is part 1. If you're enjoying this fanfiction, make sure to smash the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe with the bell icon so you never miss the next part. Alright, let's begin part 1. When people think of demons, they usually imagine beasts. They imagine bloodthirsty, unruly, no common sense, monsters or individuals who love nothing more than to destroy, kill, or create chaos for human beings. They have nothing to live for except for themselves, and they wish to bring about the destruction of humankind. Stories, tales, and fables have all been spread about demons as a force of nature that could never be controlled or could never learn to love, cherish, or feel sympathy for anything other than itself. It was below humans, below the gods, and below anyone's time to understand even the simplest of its feelings. A demon didn't deserve to eat, sleep, or dream. Hell, it didn't even deserve to live. Parents tell their kids scary stories about monsters hiding in the proverbial or literal closet that would come out and eat them if they didn't behave or were unruly. No one understood such words. No one would think that kids would pass it on. Throughout time, tales of demons passed from generation to generation, some being worshipped and praised and others being feared and loathed. It was just that simple. There was no neutrality in the sides. You either loved demons or you hated them, and it was a shame, but not an unexpected turn of events that most of humanity came to hate demons. However, little did humans know, nay comprehend the structure and society of demons. Demons held morals, they held lives, they held education, higher learning, skills that humans had never before experienced. Unlike humans, who had numerous leaders, factions, and wars over pathetic things, demons had done things honorably. They lived by a code and they only had one ruler. The ruler of their realm was the most powerful demon. He was the ruler of Makai, and everyone knew that he hated the misjudgments made about his species. He was strict, but fair. He was responsible, yet good, calm and collected. His word was final, but he was open to various opinions. Many wise and great demons looked up to him, and others held fear for him and respect for him. For weak demons, he was a protector, for others he was a symbol of utmost respect. The ruler of Makai, legends say that with the help of Kami, he shaped the earth to what it was, and Kami allowed the demons free reign over the landscape with the ruler of Makai as its leader. That was, until Kami decided to go behind their backs and create another creature, come to be known as Homo sapiens, human beings. Given the same form and structure as the angelic beings, and the demonic entities, Kami told the ruler of Makai that he knew what he was doing when he created humans and wished for the ruler to understand. In response, the ruler just walked away, telling Kami that he would be fair, but that his little project better not cross the line for his own species, which Kami had indeed promised. Most of that didn't work out so well. Over the millennia of his life, the ruler of Makai had seen that humans were prideful, fearful, and overall arrogant. Granted, yes, some demons were the same, and the ruler had to put his foot down against these people, but with humans it was like every little thing was an excuse to breed more and more hatred with one another. Well, the ruler didn't really care. So long as they didn't cross his lines, then he would be fine with whatever they did. Sad to say, but that wasn't something to last. The ruler heard how humans targeted his people for sport or for slavery. He heard how some of his species had been violated, tortured and killed because humans didn't know how to react when demons used their powers or their forms. This enraged the ruler of Makai, to hear his people cry to him for some kind of retribution, but as he reminded himself, he was fair. He could understand the fear of something that one didn't understand and addressed this to the new Kami. She told him that she would correct this quickly, while the ruler just took that word. Now for the ruler, that was one promise not to keep too many. He heard from fathers of daughters being kidnapped or violated, sons, wives being missing, fathers not returning or being hung in the air by their necks from his authority that they endure and hope that the humans would stop this and see what they were doing to their race. No, that was enough. When he scanned a female monster's memories and uncovered what he saw, his rage flared. With his power, he clasped his hands together to create the guardian of Makai and the demons. He created a being of night power restraint, its long 10 tails, its single red tomo eyes and its height as tall as anything the ruler of Makai imagined. He dubbed this creature as the Juubi. He gave the Juubi its orders. So the 10 tails went forth and sought retribution under its master's orders, razing villages, towns and people to the ground in a sea of either fire, water, earth, or wind. One swipe of its tails could destroy anything and everything. Its power could literally shake the landscape itself, making it quake for miles. The demons rejoiced in the suffering of the humans as well as the fear in their eyes. Seeing that the Juubi had its effect, the ruler of Makai stopped his creation and let it sprout into a tree, signifying to all that its rampage would not bring forth any more violence should his race be treated with the respect that it deserved. That tree's name was Shinju, and it would stay as the protector of the demon race. Humans stayed away from that tree and no one bothered the demon race again. In fact, they started wars with themselves, and that was all the ruler of Makai wanted. However, let it be known that the ruler of Makai had underestimated the foolishness of humans. One female human, by the name of Kagaya Otsutsuki, actually had the gall to take fruit meant for demons to eat, and eat it herself. Because this woman was a human, then she was given a watered-down version of the real thing. You see, demons had a power in their bodies known as Yuki. All demons have it as their bodies are naturally equipped to handle such a strain, but for humans it was fatal, in large doses. The ruler saw that this woman's body, through much pain, actually broke down the Yuki in the Shinju and converted it into an energy that humans could use. She had called this power, chakra. The ruler was angry, actually it was better to say that he was pissed. That power was for the betterment of demonic children who had to control their powers so that they could function in society. It was not meant for humans. The ruler unleashed the Juubi upon the world for the acts of this one woman so he could reclaim what his race had lost, their self-respect. No demon argued with him as many were hostile to when they had learned of the humans and their transgression. It was a literal war between the Shinju and the humans, and that is where the tale begins. Mao-sama, we have a problem that warrants your attention. It has to deal with him, came the voice of one of the ruler of Makai's attendants. This man was a trusted friend, companion, and advisor to the great demon king. To the untrained eye, he was simply a middle-aged man with long flowing red hair. At the bottom of his face was a goatee stash of red hair. He had blue eyes, the same as the great demon king's, and his stance held that of a very high-class type of demon. His name was to be kept hidden as demons were very careful about their names. Names held power and demons abided by power every chance that they got. Once a demon released its name to someone close, then that someone had some measure of power over the demon in question, and demons hated submitting themselves. So, last names were customary except by close friends. What is it now, Grimoire-san? The king of demons, or monsters, asked, and the man gave a small bow of his head, flashing that charismatic smile of his that the demon king had come to find pleasant. However, it slowly went south and turned into a frown as the high-class demon raised his eyes. The Shinju has come under assault by my liege. It seems that the humans are finally revolting against your power. They sought out the sage again, he said, and the demon king sighed as he pinched the bridge of his nose. That brat really doesn't know his place, does he? Fine. I'll get him to leave again, the demon king said before standing to his feet. Upon inspection, the man was tall. His arms and legs lean and fit, made that way from millennia of training. He wore black pants, clothing fashioned from the skin of dragons. His shirt covered his chest and his arms were caught by armbands. He drew a sigh from his mouth as he blinked. His eyes were fire, red in the pupils as demon slits. Around his shoulders was a long, dark cloak. Nothing seemed special about it other than the fact that the Demon King liked it. His servants had it fashioned for him as it took the Jorogumo clan, an entire clan of half-male and half-female spider yokai, 5 members to help sew it all together. When he got it, the Demon King wore it with pride. He wore open-toed sandals as he walked on the soft, fire-red carpet of his office. The thing that completed his look was his bright yellow sun hair and his kitsune-defining whisker marks. The edges of his hair went down to form bangs at the sides of his face as he walked with the dignity and air of a king, which he was. "Grimoire-san, is Ka-chan busy?" he asked, heading for the door while Grimoire followed after him. Both went out the door and through the corridors which were filled to the brim with statues of various demons and the like. They walked out of the outer hall and into the inner hall, which was a little small, but a lot more appealing as they marveled at the shine of red drapes and curtains that were apparent around the sea stone pillars. "Not that I know of, sir. I do believe that she still wishes to spend time with you in, other activities," he said while the blonde sighed and shook his head. He couldn't help the chuckle that escaped his lips while he brushed a hand through his hair. "Is that right? Well, I think I'll take her up on that when I get back," the Demon King said with a small smile while the man, whose last name was Grimoire, gave a short smirk. He then let it out easily, prompting his lord to turn back to him with a confused expression on his face. Seeing that he was caught, the high-class devil slowly stopped and shook his head. "Forgive me, Mao-sama, but I just find it funny. Even in Makai, you do not see such an open relationship between mother and son. That is all. Though your mother has spoken with you on several occasions about finding a wife. You have turned down every invitation that has been presented to you, even from those that I would rather take myself, but Venelana is all I need to be happy," he said, and the Demon King sighed and shook his head quickly. He raised his hands to his hair and brushed them through it, making the hair fall back before snapping forward back in place. "That again, huh? Here I thought she enjoyed the time she spent with me. Well, whatever, I guess. Can you get her for me and tell her to bring my archfiend blade?" he spoke, and Grimoire raised an eyebrow while walking behind his lord. "The one that Vazda-san made for you." "My lord, I don't think it requires that much force," Grimoire spoke while the Demon King chuckled to himself. They finally made it out of the inner chambers after some time while the blonde stopped. "I'd rather not take my chances. Besides, the mutation known as the Rinnegan always did seem to captivate me. No idea why, maybe it's because it's some side effect of them taking Yuki into their bodies. You never know. Please and thank you, Grimoire-san," he said with a cheeky grin that showcased his bright smile. The red-haired man nodded and quickly disappeared without so much of a trace of his presence while the blonde fell into step down the stairs, waving to the attendants, maids, servants and other demons or demonesses that populated his office building. Some demonesses sported small blushes on their face while most licked their lips when they spotted their lord. Like Grimoire-san had said, it wasn't hard to find some female who was infatuated with their Mao. He was the most powerful demon in the entire realm of Makai, so naturally he would be sought after. However, with that sought-afterness, came the flirting, stalking attacks, and sometimes rape attempts. It didn't bode well for the Mao that the demons had a higher sexual frustration than humans did, which was why even he had to hold himself back. Though he could thank his mother for that. As he walked through the streets, he noticed some kids in the streets playing around. "Mao-sama," they called to him. The demon lord looked down as they ran up to him and bowed quickly. "And what game might you four be playing?" he asked, and the 4 kids smirked. "Foxfire, Mao-sama. Do you wanna play?" one of them asked, and the demon lord chuckled as he shook his head. "Maybe some other time. I have to go now," he said to them, making them pout, but they understood that their lord had to be a busy person, so they allowed him to go. He smiled to himself as he passed people while they waved happily to their king. He simply waved back. His ears picked up on the whispers that went his way, and he let a small smile grace his face before he suddenly dashed off in a blinding speed, kicking up dust. The people awed at the sight before he became a red blur to anyone watching him. He smirked and jumped into the air, performing a backflip, and landed on a rooftop. He looked up at the dark red skies surrounding Makai as well as the sound of harpies in the air. The blonde demon lord shook his head and landed on the ground directly in front of the gates that held his kingdom and its lands in place. He looked back before shaking his head slightly. It seemed that he got a little excited from that little jump and leapt a ways away from the kingdom, but at least he got to where he wanted, and that was easy enough for him. He gave a cheeky grin before flapping his cloak as he kept walking. However, that grin didn't stay for long before he turned serious. He looked forward and frowned as spotted a large seal in the dirt at his feet. His eyes slowly turned cold before he heard his name being called. Sochi. The demon lord's eyes lost their coldness at the calling of his name. Only one person was ever given express permission to call him. He turned his head and he noticed Rumori and his mother coming for him. He couldn't help the small chuckle that escaped his lips. He was always happy to see his mother, though given the strange relationship that they had then it was all right for the most part. None of the demon community complained and none saw anything wrong with their relationship, in fact most supported it than others. The demon lord's mother had dark, brunette hair. Just like him, she had 3 sets of whisker marks on the sides of her cheeks. The tops of her head were adorned by black fox furry ears. She wore a dark red, custom obi-style dress that did little to hide her cleavage. A white, silk short skirt wrapped around the frame of her other places of modesty. She wore red shoes with the tip being covered in black tips. She also had golden eyes just like his hair. The demon lord always knew he looked more like his father than his mother, and that was sometimes something that irked him, but he learned to deal with it. His mother certainly bore him no ill will over it, so he wouldn't do the same. The last thing about his mother was the way those 9 white tails of hers whipped left and right. They were so soft to the touch that he remembered, and she was also very sensitive there, which he had found out a little earlier. Turning around, he smiled while his mother and his friend, Rumori, dropped to the ground. Ka-chan, he said lovingly while she offered a wide smile. I have brought Ari-sama, Mao-sama, the middle-aged man said while the demon king slowly nodded. He walked to his mother while she held out the blade in her hands. He looked at her for a second before turning around. He couldn't stop the smile on his face before he pinched his cheek lightly. What's so funny, Sochi? The woman named Ari asked while her son shook his head. He turned back around before grabbing her shoulders, surprising the young-looking woman as her tails lowered slightly. Nothing, Ka-chan. Thank you for bringing it to me, he said, and she slowly nodded before closing her eyes. She waited for a few minutes for something to happen, but nothing ever did. She then groaned and opened one eye to see her son looking at her confusingly. She then gave a playful pout while he raised an eyebrow, seemingly confused. What? He asked with a blink of his eyes. Both heard snickering and turned to see the head of the Grimoire clan doing his best to hold in his laughter, and they could see that he was failing miserably. Sochi-kun, when the sun is about to go away, he should leave his mother only after a "see you later" kiss. Ari said, grinning widely while the demon king, for once, sweat dropped. He then sent a glare to the head of the Grimoire clan as the redhead let out little snickers every now and then. He then sighed and looked back to his mother before he noticed her tails fall to the ground slowly. He then grinned and his body shivered in chuckles. I'm just kidding, Ka-chan. Looks like I can still get you, he said while Ari frowned. Not funny, Sochi-kun, she said, and Naruto slowly nodded before he kissed his mother on the lips. He then wrapped his arms around her waist while her tails rose into the air. Ari moaned slightly in her son's warm mouth before both parted quickly. Her eyes looked dreamily off into space before she returned from her shock and licked her lips. You'll have to hurry back. I'll be lonely if you're gone, Sochi, she said, and Naruto frowned while strapping his archfiend blade to his waist. Go blame the sage for this. I'd rather deal with him myself than risk anyone else. I'll be back in a few, he said, and his mother nodded while he turned to his friend. Take care of her for me while I'm gone, Grumori-san, he said, and the redhead man nodded with a bow. As you wish, Mao-sama. May you have a safe trip, he said, and both watched as he stepped on the seal. A large light hovered over his form before he vanished from their view. A jolt of light went into the ski before it scattered into nothingness. Both the Grumori head and his mother, Ari, watched him leave before sighing. Be safe, Sochi-kun, she thought to herself as she watched her son go off to do his duty as the king of Makai. Both kept looking at the sky until there was nothing left to look at anymore. Seeing this, Grumori cleared his throat and grinned. Shall we go back, milady? Ari turned back to the red-haired man and couldn't stop the small smile on her face. She shrugged her shoulders and quickly turned around. Yes, I think we can do that. So how is Vene-chan doing? The Demon King's mother asked while Grumori clan head sighed and slumped his shoulders, letting his charismatic charm fall if ever so slightly. She's just been busy raising our daughter. Our son helps, but you know how he is from time to time, he said while she laughed and held her stomach to keep from getting any pain in her sides. He soon followed suit after her as they laughed their cares away, neither knowing what was going to happen or how it would shape the world and where they lived. Earth Realm. The Demon King dropped to the ground and slowly opened his eyes. He was standing in a simple cave and not even 10 seconds had passed since he felt an influx of power to the east of his direction. He narrowed his eyes before he busted out of the caves with unrivaled speed and shot off through the trees. His feet left marks on the tree branches indicating just how hard he was landing on said branches before he continued dashing off. Sage, you have interfered in my affairs for the last time. You and your mother have stolen what was mine in my race from the very beginning. I let you off because I wasn't one to punish a child for what their parents did, but now you've given me a reason. A reason I'm slightly glad for. Who do you think you are? You will learn your place. He growled deeply as he shot off, the wind rushing through his hair. He couldn't stop the scowl on his face as his blade pulsed dangerously. It didn't take even half an hour before he arrived at the site. He took notice of a large cavern and a large point of stairs. He would walk, but the Demon King didn't have the luxury of time. So, he jumped them all and came up to a sight of big steel doors keeping the cave shut. He noticed the doors were barred shut with a powerful Fuinjutsu seal and snorted. Quickly flipping through his racing hand signs, he quickly slammed the door and watched it crumble to the ground in dust with a slightly annoyed look on his face. HMPH, you truly believe such a thing could stop me? Pitiful, he said to himself. He stepped inside and just as he did, a loud roar ushered through the corridors of the large, slight damp cave. The wind picked up so fast that the Demon King's cloak flapped in it heavily, almost threatening to tear off his shoulders, but Mao just looked absolutely livid. His body tensed as he kicked up his pace with an extra spring in his step. He dashed left and right through the various corridors of the cavern temple that he had built to house his creation before he came to a large clearing, and it was there that he noticed a man standing before his creation, the Juubi. He had a long beard and short light grayish-colored shaggy hair that spiked up in the front with two distinctive parts of his hair resembling horns. He wore a white full-length cloak with a high collar, revealing his necklace with 6 red magatama. He held a shakuho in his right hand as he waved it back and forth. The power that exuded from his body was enough to at least make the Demon Lord respect him, even if his mother was a thief of his people's power. Sage. Came a roar, and just from that voice everything stopped. The primordial god, the Juubi, suddenly looked down and became docile. Noticing its master, Mouse-san, came a very elderly voice. The demon lord growled as he stepped closer. What the hell do you think you're doing to Juubi-chan? Don't think I forgot that you sealed her into yourself, which was perhaps the stupidest thing any human has ever done. He said while the Sage of Six Paths turned around and looked down in his interrupter's way. I am sorry for this, but it must be stopped. I understand that you are angry, and I understand that what I have is an insult to you given my mother's actions, and I cannot express my sincerest regrets for it being done, but I need to stop this. This senseless destruction that you have brought upon us. You just want your people to be safe, just as I wish for all harmony to come for human beings, he said while the Demon King took a step closer. It is not your place to apologize for the sins of your mother. That's one of the reasons why I didn't outright kill you when she birthed you. However, you have crossed the line. I warned you not to get in my way. You wouldn't want your unrightfully given power to be taken, would you? Then imagine the feeling of that for my race. I don't think I have to tell you how scared one member of the Phoenix clan was when they were found out. I had to do all in my power to excuse the actions of you humans so they didn't end up upsetting the natural order put forth by myself and Kami. Don't go assuming that you have the right to dictate what happens in this world, because you do not. Stand down, Sage. The mouse spoke viciously while the Sage of Six Paths stood undeterred. For the good of humanity, I cannot do that, Mouse-san. I truly hope that the day will come when demons, angels, and humans can coexist with each other. I am sorry, he said, and the Demon King's senses were instantly on high alert before he noticed the entire cavern light up in Fuinjutsu seals. Acting quickly, the Demon King slammed his hands together, but he was too late as white chakra chains blasted from the walls and caught his hands. They wrapped around his wrists and then proceeded to wrap around his legs and his neck. The Demon King growled as he fell to the ground. He snarled while he looked forward. What is this? The Demon King asked heatedly while the Juubi started to rage in anger. It glared down at the Sage of Six Paths before raising its hand to crush the insect where it stood. I truly ask that you forgive me. I don't know what will happen in the future, but humanity will no longer be under the thumb of this force of nature, he said as he turned back around. The Demon King watched the sage's hands flare. One's hand in light chakra and the other in dark chakra. He then closed his eyes and with great speed he dodged Juubi's strike. He then placed his hands on the monster's arm, and the Mao bore his eyes to the sight of his creation being split off into 9 separate beings. A tanuki, a flaming cat, a turtle-like beast, a small ape, a small dolphin horse, a slug, a larva, an octopus bull, and lastly a 9-tailed fox. He snarled while they quickly jumped back. You! What did you do to us? Came the sound from the 9-tailed fox. They all growled towards the sage before they rushed over to the Demon King's side. A sight that greatly confused both the sage and the Demon Lord. My lord, are you all right? The red-haired ape asked, and the Demon Lord rose an eyebrow. How did he split them off? That wasn't something that I had seen from Chakra before. Does it have to do with his Rinnegan? Kuso, these chains are laced with holy energy. They're sapping my Yuki. How was he even able to perform this? He thought to himself before he looked up and tugged out a smile. Why yeah, just peachy, he said before he noticed the sage standing in front of him. He growled while he noticed the Sage of Six Paths only looking at him with sympathy. I do not bear you any ill will, but I must stop this chaos. Please, forgive me. Maybe one day when you revive you will see what humanity has to offer to your race, he said before he slammed his staff into the ground making it quake violently. Hagoromo. The mouse shouted before a flash of light appeared over his form and he vanished out of sight. There was no trace of his power anywhere. There was no trace of his influence anywhere. He was just gone. The tailed beasts gasped as they looked at nothing. The only spot that showed this was reality was the burnt ground at their feet. 2. Sand, they each said while the sage closed his eyes. Please forgive me, he said before he walked away, leaving the nine-tailed beasts alone. He felt bad enough and he didn't need the stick around for them. Hopefully the children would forget about vengeance and go off to start a new life away from their father's influence. It wouldn't do good if they didn't do that. He just hoped that they would not hold a grudge against him if he did. However, now he had a husk of the Juubi to deal with. That and now he would work finishing his teaching to the world about chakra and its applications. It was time to finish teaching humanity to defend itself, and he could only hope that someday humans would come to understand peace that he so eagerly taught. Meanwhile, in a pocket dimension of some sort, the Demon King frowned as he tapped his finger on his shoulder. Is all this? Where the hell am I? Damn sage. Can never mind his own damn business, Datbeo, the Demon King said to himself before his eyebrow twitched. Stupid verbal tick, always popping up when he didn't want it. Maybe that was why his mother always teased him whenever he said that. The only thing in that pocket dimension with him was a portal that he could use to view the outside world. He sighed to himself before shaking his head slightly. Now he was stuck in here, and for some unknown reason, this dimension negated his powers of Yuki, so he wasn't going anywhere for a while. Ka-chan is going to be pissed off, I know it, he said to himself. He had hoped that someone, well anyone, would reply to him, but all he got was the lonely silence. Oh, this was going to be a long day. So, the Demon King did what he did best. He raged. For what seemed like hours, he raged at nothing but the screen in front of him. He growled for hours before he noticed that the outside world had turned to night. He then sighed and shook his head. He brought himself back to his senses and carefully rubbed the bridge of his nose. He laid back on nothing. Is that right? Yeah, it was. He laid back on nothing as he watched the screen with a bored expression. He watched nothing happen before he just decided to fall asleep. He had hoped that those 9 kids that he met were all right. The world, despite how friendly, calm or even grateful it was filled with bastards of every shape and color that were hostile to demons. He had seen it and he hated it when someone thought they knew more than he did, even when they weren't alive nearly as long as him. It irked him to no end, but not enough that he would actually do something about it. If he needed to voice his demands, orders, or opinions on the matter, then he would do that. He didn't like having to repeat himself. Well, at least he could view the world so he wasn't entirely secluded. Now, he just had to find something interesting. Oh look, a bird passed in the sky. This dot was going to take a while. Days, months, years, a good 2 or 3 centuries passed as the Demon Lord cracked open an eye and took a look at the world. Before the sage passed, he had turned the husk of the Juubi into what humans called the moon. The Demon King snorted before he rolled his eyes at what he was seeing. Nothing about humanity had changed. In fact, it all actually grew worse. The use of chakra quickly began to spread throughout the world, and just like all things that came with power, war was easily predicted. It amassed them out just how trivial humans would fight over anything. Nothing was honorable about their combat when compared to how his race did things. Oh sure, there was the occasional righteous person that popped up now and again to fight for the good of the people, but they all merely lived hollow lives and usually either ended up dying alone or having some happy life off in the mountains or plains of wherever till they died then. It had all been so trivial to the Demon King. What did all this fighting equate to? Money. That was useless once you were dead. Power. Oh please. As he continued to monitor humans, he found that they were able to use the 5 elements of nature, fire, water, wind, lightning and earth to bend to their will for whatever purpose. It seemed like some shoddy attempt at the yojutsu of the demons that his people had used, but he at least gave them points for creativity, if not anything else. Another century passed, the humans began to create settlements with each other. Their wars never stopped still. Kingdoms fell, kings killed, queens killed, family killed family for power. People were bargaining away. It really made him wonder how Cammy viewed her children to become something like this. Most people started to join together into settlements. They had been called clans, and the Demon King wondered just how much like the demons did he find in common with humans. Watching for a good while, he found that humans were still stupid. They went to war for pathetic reasons and left the land bathed in blood. Some even disrespected his people by calling themselves demons of so-and-so. It really pissed the Mao off that his people were being so discriminated against. The demons were a proud race, and sure, there was the not-so-unusual case of a rogue demon who got a little in over their heads when it came to their so-called rights and authorities, but he felt that he had been fair. He certainly didn't want his people's names to be used in such a way. All this time to himself, the demon lord actually found himself thinking about his life and his people back in Makai. He was sure that he had worried them sick beyond this point. Just the thought of all the questions was driving him up the proverbial wall. He never realized how much he had taken for granted with his time passing here. He missed his mother, he missed the head of the Grimoire clan, the Phoenix clan, Citri clan, Leviathan clan, and Beelzebub clan. He also missed his good friend, Issa Shuzan. The vampire was easily an S-class Yukai in his forces. He missed them all. He actually wondered how he got by on his own the ways that he did. He even had to wonder how Vazda and them were doing, the best four of his forces and the most loyal to his decisions. He truly could have hoped for no greater than them. Not like he could have asked for greater than them. Listen to him, reviewing his life like a dying man. It made the demon lord chuckle somewhat when he was bored of things to do. As luck would have it, he could still physically train in this little dimension of his. He had accumulated enough Yuki to at least create himself a special clone for spars. That's what he did in his spare time. Nothing more, nothing less. Another century passed. Now came the sudden rise of dominant clans such as those labeled to be Uchiha, Senju and Uzumaki. The Uchiha and Senju were descendants of the Sage of Six Paths, and that made the blonde all the more angry, but he tried not to hold them to it. Those people were innocent of the crimes that their forefather committed, so he withheld his destruction. As he said, he would be fair. The Uzumaki, he wasn't sure of. They had powers just like the sage in that they also wielded those sickening chains made of what he now identified to be yang chakra. That must have been what that light chakra was that the sage used before. Then the other part was yin chakra. It seemed that humans were able to have these two energies come together to create their jutsu. An interesting thing to watch, but he digressed. The Uchiha clan was basically a royal clan, to itself. It possessed a unique skill or eye technique, otherwise known as a dojutsu. They called it their Sharingan or copy wheel eye. As the name suggested, it allowed the Uchiha clan to copy any hand techniques or hand gestures, along with helping them analyze chakra and allow them to copy an original user's techniques. The blonde didn't really have much of an opinion on that clan. They were just really no names except for that one who called himself Uchiha Madara. A brat of a human who excelled at basically everything until he became the clan head of the Uchiha clan. The Mao respected strength and Uchiha Madara had strength. Granted, there were so many things that the two disagreed on, but the man had the demon lord's respect. Which was not something that he gave out easily. However, one of the things he disagreed with was their method of attaining power. Killing best friends. Taking the eyes of family. It was a very interesting way of getting power, and one that didn't really disturb the Demon King as much as it did make his respect for the clan lessen. This clan was born out of the body of the first son of the sage. However, that human was best left out of the blonde's sight. If he wasn't, then he was sure that he would burn that person in lava where he stood for some claims. In his eyes, they were all foolish people who wanted nothing but the best out of themselves to the point of murdering family. Too pathetic for his tastes. Then there was the Senju clan, a powerful and rival clan of the Uchiha, and also the strongest, most feared, and most respected clan from what the Demon Lord could see. He had respected them as well. The Senju came from the sage's second son. He only knew that much. He didn't care about the affairs of the sage after he desecrated his creation by turning it into the moon. Strangely, the Senju seemed to have a grasp of using the earth's natural resources. The ability to manipulate the existing wood to be used in battle. Mokuton, as they called it, was the ability to use wood and fight with it. Something the Demon Lord had seen certain sprites and wood elves do from time to time. They made the best vegetables in Makai. Well, anyway, just like Uchiha Madara, there was also the one in the Senju clan who caught his interest, Hashirama Senju. That boy would go places, the Demon Lord figured. He was an idealistic brat if not much else, but he was also a natural-born leader and had amazing charisma. Anyway, as he had observed, the Uzumaki clan was actually the only clan that seemed to earn the blonde's wrath more than any other clan. It was not for their ridiculous reserves nor their ability to use fuinjutsu, he actually respected that much. The only thing that he did not like about the Uzumaki, and probably never would, had to be their unnatural obsession with his race. Nearly all Uzumaki, at a young age, were taught about the existence of Makai, and many, and he meant many, of them tried to find the realm of Makai, but it was successfully hidden, something that the Demon Lord was much more than full of now that he thought about it. They truly seemed to want something from his race, but they hadn't found them, and he swore to Kami that it better stay that way. Fast forward about 30 or 40 years and you see a sight that truly did not make the Demon King care. No, seriously, he didn't care anymore. The humans were at it again, having their stupid little war bouts of bullshit supremacy over each other. Now it was the Uchiha clan with Madara as its leader fighting anyone and everyone who wouldn't submit to them, burning the land and laying waste to lives as they dominated the landscape. However, they had come to a standstill once met with the Senju clan. So the Demon Lord actually got treated to a sight. The Senju clan head and the Uchiha clan head, instead of having all their people fight and bring death, decided to fight against each other. Truly, that was the only noble thing in this war to date. He had to say, he was actually impressed with their endurance. However, all semblance and respect for the Uchiha clan died out for the Demon Lord as he bit his lower lip, seething in rage at what he saw. Madara had the audacity to summon and control his son, Kyuubi. Yep, the Demon Lord had kept track of all 9 of his children since they were originally created from his first one. He bore them no hatred. He had no reason to. However, this was a definite cross of lines that he could never allow. His Yuki flared along with his anger, and for once he could finally come into contact with the outside world. Not completely, but little subtle changes. He quickly aided Hashirama as one time the Demon Lord quickly made water that they were standing on, quickly heated up before evaporating in steam to help Hashirama in his endeavor. A cheater. Yep. Did he give it to me? Hell no. Screw fairness this once. The blonde Mao was actually impressed, if not a little annoyed. The Uchiha and Senju fought for 3 days. 3 days. He intervened a shit ton and it was still 3 days. It was only by the act of an Uzumaki, one named Mito, who truly earned the blonde's ire when he saw her seal the Kyuubi into her body. That truly got him on his bad side. Also, talk about anticlimactic. So the Uchiha and Senju formed an alliance, and under their power they decided to, what was it? Oh yeah, form a village of shinobi while the Uzumaki kept the Kyuubi under guard. Oh, but let them out tell you that it just didn't stop there. No, the humans further tested his patience when Hashirama thought to provide equality to the nations and sought to give everyone a biju. The Mao's children were not animals to be hunted. However, They hunted and soon all 9 were contained without a thought. He knew what the first thing was that he was going to do when he got out. He was going to get his kids, reunite them and take them home. He'd find out something to do with Juubi-chan at another time. It seemed that all went well for Hashirama's little plan. The clans came together in various ways. There were 5 villages in total: Konohagakure, Sunagakure, Iwagakure, Kurigakure, and Kumogakure. Each of these villages had a biju which to use as a weapon should anything threaten them, and the people they had contained them were labeled as Jinchuriki. That was a term that left a bitter taste in the ruler of Makai's mouth at the mere thought, but enough about that. Oh, and how could he forget the alliance of the Uzumaki and Konohagakure with the marriage of Mito Uzumaki and Hashirama Senju, although that was relatively short seeing as how the Shadaime Hokage, is what people called these leaders, died a few years after that with his brother taking the reins. The Demon Lord was surprised how much order was maintained in the times that held brief lapses of peace for the nations. The Nadaime Hokage created the Council for Konoha, the Anbu, the Academy, which seemed to be just the same as his Yukai Academy back in Makai. The Demon Lord chuckled at the thought. However, it is also known that now the Mao was simply sure of the fact that humans loved to kill each other. Madara disappeared from the world, becoming a traitor to Konoha, and the village was thrown into its first war. He watched as historians dubbed it the First Great Shinobi War. Yeah, real great job giving his kids over to those pathetic nations. Now everyone had a powerhouse with them. Just perfect. Sadly, not that the Mao really cared, but the Nadaime Hokage died in that war by Kumogakure's Kinkaku force and dubbed a young prodigy, Sarutobi Hiruzen, as the Sandaime Hokage. Around that time, he also heard about the transfer of Kyuubi to another container. He watched as the Kyuubi was unsealed from Mito Uzumaki and into the young Kunoichi, Kushina Uzumaki. The Mao furrowed his brows at the sight. A child in every meaning of the word and an even more hothead than his mother. Mao shuddered at the thought before a painful chuckle escaped his lips at the thought of his mother. He wondered if she was all right all the time he had been gone. Not even 20 years later, the next Shinobi War started. This time between Konoha, Suna, Aim, and Iwa. The Mao really didn't understand the purpose of these things. He said it, and he would say it again. This was all pathetic and pointless. Sure, he had fought in many wars, but those had purpose. This one was like forcing ideals from one person to the next only to have lives wasted for nothing. He didn't see the point at all. He watched the fight between Hanzo, the Salamander, and the suddenly named Sannin, consisting of Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade Senju. The Mao didn't bother learning the last names of the first 2. They weren't really important at all. They lost, horribly, however Hanzo had shown honor and pride, letting them lick their wounds and walk away. The Mao shifted his attention away from that war after a while, suddenly finding himself being drawn to Konoha's academy, where he spotted the redhead Uzumaki once again. She loudly proclaimed to be the first female Hokage, which the Mao had to chuckle at. He couldn't remember the last time he saw such fire in a person's eyes after Izuna Uchiha. Anyway, he frowned at how she was treated at times. Being bullied by pathetic brats, but he had to sweat drop when she utterly pounded them all into oblivion. Was it strange that he had a little arousal from that? Shut up. Well, aside from her, there was also one other kid who caught his attention. Minato Namikaze, son of Arashi Namikaze, former daimyo of Hai no Kuni, until he became an orphan. The kid was an okay shinobi. The Mao had been impressed when he managed to save the redhead from being kidnapped by Kumo shinobi. The two seemed to hit it off quite well, though he was surprised when that didn't last as long as he thought it might have. Must have just been a romance born out of a bad situation. Those didn't usually last very long. He knew, he had seen them all the time. So the two decided to simply remain friends, close friends, but nothing more. Time skip to another few years and you find, oh seriously. Another great shinobi war. Who would have thought? Now the third great shinobi war was a battle between Konoha and Iwagakure, Kumogakure and Kurigakure. Seriously, what did people have against that village? The Mao, in all honesty, disliked them all, but to attack one so many times was ridiculous. They didn't even win. The Mao watched Minato Namikaze lead his team until the death of one student, Obito Uchiha, but upon closer inspection he saw darker forces at work. He'd have to keep an eye on that. He then watched one, Kakashi Hatake kill his teammate, Rin Nohara, to keep Konoha safe by trying to kill the Sanbi. That truly made the Mao's rage for humanity heightened, but it was controlled. He then watched in slight surprise of a renewed Obito as he laid waste to dozens of Kiri Anbu like any decent Yukai would be able to do. He had to applaud the kid. That was a great show, even if it was somewhat dark. So that war ended with Minato Namikaze and his famed Hiraishin technique. Well, actually Nadaime was the one who created that first, but Minato Namikaze was the one who really brought the technique to the light of the world. For Mao, it looked like a shot-off attempt at his own technique, the Shiharitsu Crimson Burst. A very good technique was what he thought of it, though from looking it seemed that it had to rely on the applications of time-space as well as the use of markers. His own didn't require such a thing. Mao really had to be impressed that he decimated over 1,000 Iwa shinobi using that technique. It spoke true volumes of the man's strength even if he was still a foolish human. The Mao watched the man's coronation to Yondaime Hokage and just shook his head. Well, nothing else happened in the rest of the years for a good while, and now came the precipice of everything that the Mao had tried. Centuries after centuries, the barrier or whatever was keeping him in this dimension. Of course, why didn't he see it before? No way could a seal hold forever against the power of the ruler of Makai. It would break eventually, and finally after about a good few centuries it was finally showing signs of cracking and he could be set free. However, as he wanted to deny it, he would have to reorder some things. Oh hell no, he'd be damned if he turned himself into a child and took that pathetic academy course, that shit. He was a king and he would not be told what to do by weaker beings. All he needed was a catalyst. Because he would be using most of his power, his body would revert and be locked until he reclaimed his full powers once again, but he was sure that no one could bother him. Like he would give them the chance. Fate seemed to side with him on that as well. No, seriously, she was an alright person once you got to meet her. After about 5 to 6 years of being Hokage, Minato Namikaze came to his greatest challenge. Konohagakure was once again attacked, and this attack was what made the Mao angry for the last time. He saw his child, the Kyuubi, summoned just like before and unleashed upon Konoha. The destruction wrought and the people it killed was incredible to say the least. So much was going on in the Demon King's eyes. Buildings on fire, crushed civilians and shinobi on the ground, debris everywhere. The Mao was confused. Why would the fox do this? What motive could it have? Well, yeah, other than the whole, he got captured and treated like expensive jewelry, bits, but on further investigation, the blonde Mao found that his son was being controlled by, oh look at that, a Sharingan. The Demon King found his tolerance of that clan dwindling fast, but when he panned over to them, he found that the compound was entirely empty. The Mao was confused. Where the hell did they all go? Well, whatever. He would have to worry about them later. Some uncommon concern washing over him, he panned his screen to where Kushina was and saw her lying unconscious in the grass in some standard Jonin attire. Raising an eyebrow, he sighed and shook his head before turning back to Minato Namikaze. He watched Minato fight a masked man that held a Sharingan in one eye. The Mao snickered to himself before he couldn't help, but laughed out loud as he clutched his stomach. Oh, don't think he forgot his anger, but right now the irony was hitting him in the face. So it was that Uchiha Kozo, huh? Well, the Mao quickly thought that this could be interesting. Minato Namikaze released control of the Kyuubi from the Uchiha brat before the latter vanished, promising the demise of Konoha. The Kyuubi continued to rage around before being pushed out of the village, and it was then that the blonde demon king noticed the look that weighed heavily on his heart. The Mao wondered what he was about to do before he Hiraishin Ed away for a second and then came back with a small child. The demon king widened his eyes as the Yondaime poofed away along with the Kyuubi. The screen followed him quickly and the ruler of Makai watched as Yondaime placed the child on an altar. Please forgive me, young one, but there is no other option for us. I hope that you will be treated as a hero and that you will grow up strong. It's a shame that Kushi-chan only wanted to be friends. I wonder what I would have named our child if we had one. Well, please stay safe and grow up strong. The Mao heard Yondaime speak as he went through multiple hand signs. No, not again, you accursed humans. I will not be sealed again. The Kyuubi hollered as it raised its claws into the air to squash the pathetic human in front of him. As his claws shadowed over Minato's form, the adult blonde cage smirked. Sorry Kyuubi, but you lose. Half of you will be sent with me to the grave, never to be seen again. The other half will be put into this child. May he grow strong and have many friends. Shiki Fujin, dead demon consuming seal, Minato called out, and the Mao watched as the area was laced with killer intent before a white-robed specter appeared in his view. Mao widened his eyes before grinning widely. Yes, this was his chance. He had to take it now or he might never get another one. With so much spiritual power around the area, it weakened the barrier of his dimension considerably, and now he just had to do something. Sage, you will regret the day that you sealed me in this damn place. I'm gonna kick you for this, even if you are already dead, he said as he slapped his hands together. Quickly 9 tails flared from his back before they jammed forward into the screen. The Mao chuckled as he poured his power into breaking the barrier. His tails pulled at the portal-like screen, ripping it open, and Mao struck his hand through it. He snarled as he pushed past it, still feeling the pain of holy energy against his person. His skin burned and his heart pumped, but he wouldn't stop here. He had to get out. Come on, open, damn it, he said. With the last remnants of his strength he watched as the portal, once being his only entertainment, had turned into his escape. The blonde demon lord grinned. He saw the Shinigami's arm break through Minato's stomach area before it latched onto Kyuubi's fur and pulled out half of its chakra. Now, he shouted, and the light overcame his form while the grin on his face widened to painful proportions. The demon lord, ruler over Makai, was finally free. Suddenly a blinding light appeared over the field. Minato and Kyuubi covered their eyes from the sight while the Shinigami just stood there emotionlessly. The chakra was coming at Minato full force as a figure landed on the ground. With a smirk, he blurred and surprised the death god by actually grabbing his arm. Gomen Shin-chan, but I can't let you do that. A child truly is a pain in the, aren't they? The light slowly vanished, causing Minato to widen his eyes at the figure that had the Shinigami's arm in his grasp. Kyuubi cracked open an eye and gawked. You, impossible. You couldn't be. We saw you die. Kyuubi shouted while Minato heard chuckling. Yondaime was still very much confused by everything that was going on, and he was sure that this man in front of him was not one of his own. The power that exuded from him just barely allowed Minato to stand on his feet, never mind trying to attack him. Oh son, don't you know your father better than that? Give me some credit. I am the ruler of Makai after all, he said, and Kyuubi widened his eyes before looking down quickly. 2. San, the 9-tailed fox said while the blonde demon lord grinned. He slowly nodded, and the Yondaime gawked when he watched the blonde teen actually pat Kyuubi on the nose. Don't worry. All will be explained. Now then, he turned back to Minato Namikaze and smirked. He stepped forward and the pressure slowly began to build between the demon lord and the Yondaime of Konoha. Sorry, but I can't have you sealing my kid again. Well, at least not into any more of you humans. To actually waste your life summoning Shin there. How desperate are you foolish humans? I pity your race. I really do, he said before he grabbed Minato's arm. He then held up one of his race's hand signs and spoke. Yojutsu. Rei Tenso Demon Technique. Spirit transferring, he uttered, and Minato watched as the Shinigami was forcibly released of the yin half of Kyuubi's chakra. The large mass of chakra swirled around in the air before it crashed into the blonde's body. The demon lord grinned before he went back and touched Kyuubi's forehead. Rest, son. We'll talk about this some other time. Hake Fuin, 8 trigrams ceiling, he called, and Minato watched as Kyuubi was into the blonde's body before silence reigned in the forest. Single quote. Huh? What? What did you do? He asked while the blonde grinned. He turned around and waved his finger back and forth, though he was very serious about it, which seemed to contradict the small scolding act. I don't know where you think you have the authority to demand answers from me, but I suppose questions are in order before you die. Sure, your process wasn't complete, but you used the jutsu nonetheless, so you will be having some quality time with Shin. So, I sealed my son into my body. He will no longer be your personal slave, as I have seen, the mouse said, visibly angry. Your son. The Kyuubi is a manifestation of chakra given a physical form. It does not have a father, Minato said before he was subjected to a fierce smack to the face. The stinging sensation made his senses go wild as he looked back towards his unknown assailant. Call my son and it again, and I will show you how much I am truly annoyed by your race. You have nothing to fear from your village. So leave in peace, he said while Minato narrowed his eyes. What do you plan to do? He asked, and the demon lord tapped his shoulder before tilting his head left and right. That was actually a good question. He would like to quickly get some food, seeing as how he hadn't eaten in like 4 or 5 centuries, but maybe he could wait for that a little longer. I haven't thought that far ahead, so you don't need to be concerned with it. I'm just taking back what was mine from the start. Have a good time in the belly of the Shinigami, he said, waving his hand in a goodbye fashion. Before Minato could even ask what he meant, a light covered his form and he disappeared, leaving the blonde Mao alone. He was about to walk away before he heard crying. He looked back and noticed the child still on the altar. Conscious be damned, he said with a sigh before he walked over to said altar and picked up the human child. What? He had no grudge against the kid, so it wasn't like he would just leave it to die by wolves or something like that. He was more sensible than that. However, just as soon as he picked up the baby, the demon lord suddenly found himself surrounded by Konoha's Anbu force. Each of them wore animal masks and grayish body armor with a tanto held in their hands. Halt! Who are you? Where is Yondaime-sama? They asked, and the blonde blinked. Ah, him. Yeah, well, he's dead. Now I'm sure you guys have things to do, so I'll let you do them. Later, he said as he began to walk away. The blonde then sighed and ducked underneath a sword strike. We told you not to move. You're coming with us for questioning, the lead Anbu said, and the blonde watched as an elderly man dropped out of the trees. Obvious to the Sandaime Hokage from what he observed. Sandaime-sama, we've caught this suspicious person here. What would you have us do? They asked, and the man known as Sarutobi Hiruzen looked towards the young man in question. The blonde's eyes only showed amusement of what was going on, but Hiruzen could see wisdom far beyond his years in those eyes. This was not someone to be trifled with. Where is Kyuubi? Sarutobi asked cautiously. The Anbu tensed and turned to the young man in front of their eyes. He tapped his chin for a few seconds before smiling widely. Why is he right here? Where he will stay until I see fit, he said, pointing to his stomach. The Anbu widened their eyes and Sarutobi's gaze turned deadly. You do realize that we can't let you go now, he said, and the Anbu prepared to strike, but none of them were ready for the young man to sigh and pinch the bridge of his nose. You make it sound like you could bend me to your will so easily, Hiruzen. Sarutobi, he said. Hiruzen tensed at the mention of his name. He balled his fists, but didn't give the Anbu the order to attack. Inwardly, he felt that if he did, then the place that they were standing would instantly be a giant crater, just like Konoha was for the moment. You seem to know my name. Might I ask the same from you? The elderly Sandame asked, and the blonde raised an eyebrow. He closed his eyes for a few seconds as he thought that over. He brushed his chin a few times while unconsciously rocking the small child to sleep. He thought about the pros and cons of this before he ultimately shrugged his shoulders. Pleased to meet you, Konoha. My name Naruto Uzumaki, Lord and Ruler of Makai, he said with a wide grin across his face. Things must just get a little interesting. A female figure groaned as she opened her eyes. She instantly recognized the sight of a white ceiling. The smell of drugs, needles, medicine bottles and other things assaulted her nose, telling her that she was inside the hospital. It all happened so fast. 1 minute she was out on patrol and the next she was captured by a strange masked man. He extracted the Kyuubi from her. Kushina jolted up from her bed before pain electrified her body and she cursed before gripping her shoulder as a crutch. She waited for the pain to subside before finally settling down and taking a deep breath. That man. What did he want with the Kyuubi? It can't be good. I'll have to inform Minato when I see him, she thought to herself. She was Kushina Uzumaki, Jonin of Konohagakure no Sato. Groaning, Kushina shook the covers off her body and stood to her feet. Kushina always hated hospitals with a passion. Stupid nurses and doctors telling her that she was pushing herself. She knew how much her own body could handle. She also knew that it was better to move around than to stay still. Her red hair dropped down just past her waist. The band she had used for it to be kept into a ponytail had snapped, letting her hair flow free as it possibly wanted. Through some force of will, Kushina trudged to the door, but before she could grab the doorknob she found said door already being opened. "Oh, Kushina-senpai, you're awake," came the voice of one of the Jonin. Kakashi Hitaki was his name. A member of the team that made up Obito Uchiha and Nohara Rin. Their sensei during that time was Minato. Kushina always acted like a young boy. Granted, he could be a little more open, but he was loyal and that was all that counted in Kushina's book. Well, that and that he had to treat her to ramen if they ever got the opportunity. His gray hair standing as always and his mask concealing his bottom face. His headband concealed the illustrious Sharingan eye that Obito gave to Kakashi before his untimely death. Kushina had truly sympathized with Kakashi on that matter as he came to talk with her a lot about it. Maybe it was from her friendship with Minato, but she didn't know. "Kakashi, what's going on?" Kushina asked and Kakashi sighed. He straightened his stance, Kushina noticed, and his shoulders sagged just lightly. Something told Kushina that she was in for the explanation of her life and she truly would not like it. "Anbu found you passed out in the fields outside the village 3 hours ago. Sandame-sama had the medic nin treat you as fast as they could while treating everyone else. As you're about to see, the village is not the best of sights," Kakashi answered. Kushina slowly nodded, taking it all in before she moved towards the curtain-closed windows. She pushed the curtains out of her way and opened the window. She widened her eyes and they reflected hurt, anger, and sadness at the multiple forms of debris that were once buildings. Civilians and shinobi seemed to be working like clockwork to clear it all away. Fires were still apparent in some areas, but they were small. Giant claw prints were laid on still standing buildings and on the ground. It looked as if a massive hurricane just swept through the village, which it might have just been that way. Kushina trembled as she gripped the window ledge and sighed. "If only I had sensed him faster, then this wouldn't have happened. I should have known better." "Kuso," Kushina muttered to herself until she felt Kakashi's hand over her own. "Kushina-senpai, it's all right. Everyone is fine for the most part and it couldn't have been avoided. How are you feeling?" Kakashi tried his hand at being sympathetic, which Kushina appreciated. She carefully chuckled and turned around. I'm fine, Kakashi. Just fine. How is Minato doing? Kushina asked. She had to go see him and talk to him about what had happened just then. It was all so she could make better sense of this. From all of this, now the village would have to be more alert. Once word got around that Konoha had literally been ransacked by the great nine-tailed fox, then it would entice anyone and everyone to try their hand at taking the village down, and Kushina would have that happen. Kushina saw Kakashi's face take a sullen expression and his gaze lowered to the ground. We don't know where Minato-sensei is at the moment. Some think he is dead, but others think he is missing. I am afraid that I wasn't informed, Kushina-senpai, Kakashi announced, and Kushina's hair covered her eyes. One of her best friends was now gone and no one had any idea of where he was. Kushina clenched her fists and willed the tears threatening to drop from her eyes to stop, as she had to remain strong. This wasn't a time to be crying. I see. So I take it that Sandaime Sarutobi has taken the mantle back? Kushina asked, and Kakashi quickly nodded firmly. He was just on his break and he didn't have long to bring all of this forward. However, he had been told of what had happened to the Yondaime Hokage by the Sandaime. It had only been brief, but Kakashi had seen someone who looked like Yondaime, but the teen hardly returned his gaze in the slightest. It was almost as if Kakashi didn't even register to him in the slightest. Hi, for the time being the Hokage is Sarutobi Hiruzen-sama. He's currently with the council discussing some issues. I was asked by them to find you and, if you were awake, to bring you to the council room for an explanation. Hokage-sama seemed very adamant that I do it because he said something about not wasting the Anbu. I didn't know what he meant, but there was a strange guy with them. He had blonde hair like Minato-sensei's, but he wasn't as tall. Maybe a few inches shorter. He held a baby in his arms and he had whisker marks. I don't know if that means anything, Kakashi said while Kushina raised an eyebrow. Whisker marks? She asked, and Kakashi slowly nodded. Kushina placed a finger to her chin for a few seconds to think things over. Despite her body and its current problems with her standing and physical activities, she tried to think those problems away from her mind for the time being. The one-eyed Jonin young man watched Kushina think for a few minutes. He didn't say anything to her, allowing her all the time that she needed to process things before she finally turned to him. All right, Kakashi, take me to the council room then. I'm feeling fine. You know how strong I am, Databane, Kushina said, grinning widely while Kakashi dropped. You said, Databane, again Kushina-senpai. I'm sure if you had a son he would be saying the same thing, Kakashi said, and Kushina blinked before she sighed with a shake of her head. I don't think the mother role is for me, Kakashi. It was one of the reasons why I wanted Minato and myself to stay friends. He wanted a family, but I didn't. I don't know, it was all so complicated, she said, and Kakashi quickly noticed how the situation was taking a turn for the worst before he decided to change the subject. It's not your fault, Kushina-senpai. If you aren't ready then you aren't ready. Minato-sensei wouldn't have forced you, Kakashi said, and Kushina gently smiled before patting Kakashi on the shoulder. Thank you, Kakashi. You'll grow up to be a wonderful man someday, but anyway, as I said before, take me to the council room, Kushina said, and Kakashi quickly nodded as he escorted her out of the door, with a change of clothes of course. The two quickly walked through the halls, and down some stairs before finally making their way to the foyer and the front desk. Kushina quickly sighed herself out with a small glint in her eyes. Screw hospitals. Screw them all to the damnable pits of hell. Once her sign out was done, Kushina and Kakashi came into the streets. The walk was generally silent as neither said anything to the other, just trying to keep warm since it was still fall, it being October. Kakashi took Kushina to the Hokage mansion, which thankfully was still standing tall, and took her inside. They passed the front desk area and after walking up a few stairs, Kakashi noticed two Anbu guards at the door. They seemed to stiffen right in their tracks, but Kushina just took that as them being Anbu. She never understood it. They looked like they had just been struck by fear of the highest degree. Passing them, Kakashi knocked on the door. Sandame-sama, I have brought Kushina-senpai. Kakashi spoke and both heard the voice of Hiruzen Sarutobi proclaiming that they could come inside. Kakashi pushed up the door and escorted Kushina inside. Once inside, Kushina's nose instantly felt the smell of blood. She widened her eyes when she noticed 3 Anbele dead at a person's feet. His blonde hair stood just as spiky as a certain other blonde male that she had known. He seemed to be about her height if she gave an estimate, but the level of power radiating from it. It felt suffocating. It was like her senses were going haywire. Her breathing nearly stopped, but somehow Kushina found the will to breathe and speak. What happened here? She asked the Hokage for an explanation. The council room was easily divided into 3 sections: the Civilian Council, Shinobi Council, and Advisors. The Civilian Council regulated anything having to do with citizens that lived within Konoha's walls. The Shinobi Council consisted of all the major clan heads that made up the shinobi force. The Nara, Inuzuka, Akamichi, Aburame, Uchiha, Hyuga, and Yamanaka were the clans that made up the majority of Konoha's shinobi. Kushina knew each of their names as she was friends with basically all of them. Shikaku Nara, Sum Inuzuka, Shuza Akamichi, Shibi Aburame, Fugaku Uchiha, Hiyashi Hyuga, and Inoichi Yamanaka. Right next to the Hokage were his advisors, Homura Mitokado, Kaharu Uditane, and Shimura Danzo. Oh, nothing happened. You people just don't seem to know how to keep your hands to yourselves. What happens as the result? Kushina turned back to the strange blonde in front of her, still finding his presence intimidating. She slowly narrowed her eyes at him. Before she could speak, Sarutobi beat her to it. Kushina, this is, well, he calls himself Uzumaki Naruto, Sarutobi said, and Kushina widened her eyes. Uzumaki Naruto. There was no way he could be family, could he? Kushina would have known if he was alive, she was sure of it for the most part, but she never saw the Demon King grin. Before you get your hopes up, we're not related. Not in the slightest, Kushina-san. I sometimes wonder if there is a chance I could ever call rights on my last name, seeing as how I am here first, Naruto said with a tilt of his head while Kushina snarled. What are you talking about? You were here first? She asked, and she watched Naruto scratch his scalp, ruffling his blonde hair all the same, still forgetting about the child that he held in his arms. Actually, since Minato was in a rush, he never assumed the child's gender. For Naruto, the scent of the child wasn't male, but female. However, he could understand how anyone made that assumption if they looked directly at this kid. She silently snuggled into his embrace while the Demon King sighed to himself. It's better if you don't know. You would hardly understand anyway, Naruto said, and Kushina gawked before she felt her anger spike slightly. She was ready to tell him off before, but a stern look from Sarutobi stopped her from doing so. Kushina grumbled, but let go of her anger that time, deciding to not give in to the mysterious man's advances. She folded her arms while Naruto raised an eyebrow, but didn't say any more. Now then, Naruto-san, what can we give you in return? The Kyuubi to us. Its power is dangerous and it must be contained. Surely you understand the reasons why the Biju were sealed, the Sandame said while Mao tilted his head to the side. Kushina blinked quickly before gasping. What? He has the Kyuubi. How? She asked with surprise in her voice. We are still trying to figure that out, Kushina, which is why he is with us now, Sarutobi said while Kushina glared at the man in front of her. It was entirely possible that this was the man who knocked her out and unsealed the Kyuubi. Maybe it was possible that he did it for this very purpose. However, she never got the chance to voice it as Naruto spoke. Does a father give up his children to someone else? You say that I should return him to you. To return something means that it was yours in the first place. Also you think my son is a possession. How fickle your race is, Naruto exclaimed much to everyone's surprise. Kakashi widened his visible eye while Kushina offered just the smallest of glares. Tell us boy, what do you mean by that when you say, your son? Came the voice of one Shimura Danzo. Naruto could easily see that the human was attempting to analyze him for any sort of information. The fact that he also seemed to be trying to influence him with that feeble Sharingan in his covered eye was nearly laughable. The Demon King turned a small glare to him before smiling widely. It is exactly what it means. Kyuubi is my son and that's all there is to it. If you wish to try and take him from me, well I will be very unhappy with that, Naruto replied, letting that hang in the air. Most of the clan heads frowned and Sarutobi sighed. He rubbed his temples while most of the civilians looked on in fear. Anything that could create something as monstrous as the Kyuubi was a terrible thought, one that didn't fill them with anything less than dread. Very well, let's say that you are Kyuubi's father, that must speak volumes of your strength. Care to give us a demonstration? Asked Hiashi Hyuga. The Mao turned to him and then shook his head without a care. I have nothing to prove to those who are hardly worth my time, he said. He felt shuffling and he noticed the baby squirming uncomfortably. Raising an eyebrow, he noticed that he had pushed her a little too close to his chest. He exhaled and eased his embrace which caused her to settle, but she never woke up. Everyone stared at the scene in mild confusion before someone else spoke. Be that as it may, Uzumaki-san, the Kyuubi is a massive ball of condensed chakra given a physical form. It does not have parents or an origin, came the voice of Kaharu Utatane. Kushina turned to Naruto to see his reaction, but she saw that he didn't seem to care less about what they said. See now that's where you and I differ in opinions and I won't waste my time talking with all of you over this trivial thing. Your race is hardly worth the effort. Here is what is going to happen. I'm going to take my son, leave, and hopefully never set foot into this village again. Naruto's voice boomed like the sound of instant thunder and everyone recoiled back. Sume's claws actually clawed at the desk while Shikaku and Inoichi narrowed their eyes. Hiashi and Fugaku didn't show any visible signs of a threat, but they heard it loud and clear. Naruto-san, if you leave then I will have no choice but to kill you. I have been lenient and understanding so far, but I cannot allow you to put this village in jeopardy. Naruto widened his eyes if only slightly. He turned to lock eyes with the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha before everyone in the room felt immense pressure. The civilians instantly passed out while clan heads felt their bodies slam into the tables in front of them. Cracks on the walls came and the flooring under Naruto's feet began to tear at the seams. Kushina and Kakashi fell to their knees in surprise. Oh, is that a threat to Hokage-san? I would advise that you not push your luck where you hardly have any at the moment. Get in my way and I am the one who won't be so lenient, Naruto said before he quickly turned around. With a twist of his foot a burst of air blasted through the room. Instantly the pressure was gone and everyone was able to breathe once again. It was only then that everyone realized that Naruto was gone from the room. He's gone. He took the Kyuubi. Kyuubi escaped. The civilians shivered in terror at the thought of Kyuubi taking over the body of the man before it laid waste to their village once again. Kushina and Kakashi could see the chaos that ensued before Sarutobi effectively brought it under control. Hiruzen, we have to go after him immediately. We cannot risk Kyuubi falling into another nation's hands, Danzo said quickly. This sudden turn of events was not welcome to the old war hawk in the slightest. However, he kept himself calm. It wouldn't do good to rile Konoha up that the demon that ransacked their village had easily gotten away with some unknown man as its container. Hokage-sama, I have aligned myself with Danzo-san. Whoever this man is, he's dangerous and he needs to be dealt with. If he truly does hold the Kyuubi, then it would do well for Konoha that we have him taken care of. It would be the most logical choice, came the voice of Shibi Aburame while Hiruzen sighed to himself. Yes, you are right, but not right now. We don't have the manpower to deal with that now. For now we will place a high bounty on his head. That should at least make it so that we will not lose sight of him for a while. Once we're back to some of our best strengths, then we will move forward, he said, and no one could fault him for his explanation. As it stood, Konoha couldn't even fight off one of the minor villages if it had to. It couldn't deal with this person at the moment, but when it had its power back then it would deal with him, but not before. Danzo seemed to accept that, and Sarutobi dismissed the council tiredly. As everyone left, only Kushina was left in the room. Hokage-sama, it shouldn't be possible. Only an Uzumaki could hold back the Kyuubi, and even then for this man to claim himself an Uzumaki. I can't let this go. I just need to know. Did he kill Minato? Kushina asked with a dangerous glare. Sarutobi stood firm under the glare before returning it. Kushina, Minato was a dear friend to us all, but I do not know if this Naruto had a hand in his death or not. Right now, it's possible, but not justified in any way, Sarutobi proclaimed. Kushina held her head down and nodded before Sarutobi patted her on the shoulder. Now then, tell me what happened and start from the beginning. Anything you can remember will help us greatly, he said, and the Red Death just sighed tiredly before slowly nodding as they walked away from the council room. With Naruto. In a burst of wind, Naruto flashed to the field where he had been 3 or 4 hours ago. He looked down and noticed that he was still holding the child from last night. Ah, I forgot to return her to them, Naruto said to himself. He grumbled before he turned himself back to the village, or semi-desolate wasteland of debris that was the village. He sighed and shook his head. He then felt eyes on him and looked down to see the child staring at him. Obviously somehow it had woken up when he performed his act. It stared at him before laughing. The Demon King shook his head quickly. Don't look at me with those eyes. You'll die if you stay too close to me, Naruto said, and he only noticed the child giggling at him while he deadpanned. He wasn't lying when he said that. Yuki was deadly to humans in large doses, hell, in small doses it was severely irritating, and for a baby, with no fully formed barriers against Yuki as concentrated as the mouse, then this kid would die in a given week, give or take a day or two, which was something Naruto felt he couldn't allow to happen. He would not be the cause of death to a human if he could help it. He made to tear the child's grip off his coat, and finally he was subjected to a very loud cry. The Demon King winced while he snarled. Kami, it sounded like the screech of the clan of the Banshees. His ears were sensitive to sound. He could hear farther since he was a demon, and this close of a loud sound was not something he enjoyed. All right, fine. Just stop. The Demon King cried and crashed the baby into his chest. Instantly, like magic, the child stopped and gripped his demonic cloak. She had a large smile on her face while Naruto sighed and leaned against a tree. He watched her curl up into a ball before drifting to sleep. She opened her mouth and let out a yawn, and Naruto's eyes suddenly twitched. Did he imagine that? He'd better not have. Naruto was sure that he had seen very small teeth. Now normally this wasn't a big deal to him, but now it was only because this child was only about a day old at the most and she already had teeth. For human babies, they didn't get their first tooth till 6 months or so after their birth. Being bored made you study up on most things in an infinite pocket dimension. Now demons got their first teeth when they were 2 months old. Since Yuki was more concentrated chakra, then it went through their bodies much faster and structured the body much better, producing bodily things at early ages. For teeth, this was no more apparent than in so you might be a vampire. I wonder from which clan you're from, if any of them. Maybe Issa can tell me. Well, it shouldn't matter. Looks like I will indeed keep you around, kid. Now then, what might your name be called? Naruto said to himself. He sat in the grass for a while as the child slept in his arms. He saw something shimmer in the grass and stood up. Walking over to it, Naruto found that he picked up a necklace with a small name tag. Raising an eyebrow, he flipped the tag over. Maybe that Minato guy dropped it when he came back with the kid. The Demon King eyed the name on it before smiling. Saya. So your name is Saya, is it? Naruto asked nothing, getting a response. He supposed that was fair since the child was sleeping. He shifted his arms to a more comfortable stance for Saya as she continued her deep slumber. Naruto smiled slightly before his eyes narrowed. How a demon ended up here was at the front of his thoughts. Those thoughts were not connected to his domain. There was no time to lose. Time to get to business, and the first step was simple. Standing to his feet, Mao quickly raised his hand into the air. The wind swirled around violently before he slammed his hand to the ground. Megan Kuchio's no jutsu demonic summoning technique, Naruto called out, and a large array of seals appeared on the ground before a purplish light overwhelmed Naruto's form. He steeled his gaze as the light slowly dissipated. He looked down and the sight made him grin as the figure stood to their feet. To summon me, you must be quite strong for a human. Who are you and name your? The figure opened his eyes and froze. He gazed into blue eyes similar to his own, and despite his high-class appearance, he was greatly in shock. In Naruto's eyes, he hadn't even aged a day. Ma, Ou-sama, he uttered out of his mouth. It's been a while since Grimoire, Naruto said with a small smile on his face. The red-haired man that was, and still is, the Mao's attendant quickly dropped on one knee and bowed. You're safe. Mao-sama, this is astounding. Forgive my disrespect of what I said earlier. I had not known that it was you, the man known as Grimoire said while Naruto smiled and shook his head. Stand up, Grimoire-san. I don't need anyone bowing to me right now, he said, and the Mao's attendant quickly got to his feet. He gave a bright smile on his face while Naruto returned it. It was then that in that field both Mao and his attendant laughed, holding their sides. This continued for a while until they both calmed down. Grimoire, how is Makai? Naruto asked firmly. Grimoire quickly straightened up and cleared his throat. Well, Mao-sama, it is complicated at the most. After your disappearance, your mother, Ari-sama, took it as her personal goal to deal with everything. You have no idea how much it broke her heart when you didn't return. She contemplated the demon sacrifice several times, but she held on from a few friends. She's truly tried her best, and nearly all her efforts went into finding you. With the water Yukai, earth Yukai, wind Yukai and fire Yukai. She went around the world looking for you or any lead that anyone had on you. Luckily she kept Makai from falling into chaos, but nearly a millennium has taken its toll on her. Not physically, but mentally. I can see that she is nearing her breaking point if she does not see you, Grimoire said while Naruto frowned and bit his lower lip. He felt a ping of guilt and anger hit his chest. He'd have to rectify all of this quickly. He'd also have to bring order back quickly. Thank you, Grimoire. Thank you for looking out for her all this time. Truly I have no one greater as a friend or queen in my peerage than you, Naruto said with a smirk while Grimoire brushed a hand through his long red hair and smirked. Anything for my king, he said, nodding quickly. He then looked down and noticed the child in the blonde's arm. Mao-sama, this is, he didn't finish while the blonde demon king looked down and chuckled. He shook his head lightly before placing a finger to his lips. Grimoire, say hello to Saya. Let's just say that I managed to be at the wrong place at the right time. I have reason to believe that she's a vampire, the Demon King explained while Grimoire narrowed his eyes. From which clan? He asked, but the Demon King shook his head. I do not know. Are the clans still the same after all these centuries? He asked, and Grimoire slowly nodded his head that those clans hadn't changed in the slightest. However, there is a current change in the four great Satans, my lord, Grumori said, and Naruto quickly narrowed his eyes and turned his head to his attendant. Ari-sama was there to witness the coming of the new generation, he said, and Naruto frowned before finally sighing for the umpteenth time. I see. Well, you won't mind if I see the validity in these 4. I will not be rude about Grumori, but those 4 positions are ones that I hold in extremely high regard. They aren't for just anyone, Naruto said, and Grumori nodded quickly. Hi, I understand that. Do as you wish. I have no qualms with it, he uttered quickly, and Naruto nodded. Very good. Now then, where is Ka-san? Naruto asked. That was the first thing on his list of things to do. He would get his mother to calm down for the first part and then he would move on to other things. She is, at the meeting. As the temporary Mao, she never took the title, only claiming it until her return. She attended all the meetings of the Grand Council. She's also there now, Grumori said while Naruto nodded. Very well. Take us there immediately. I've laid on my shoulder long enough. Let's go crash a meeting, he said, and Grumori quickly placed a hand on the blonde's shoulder. Both felt a burst of light instantly over their forms before the 3 disappeared at an unseen speed. Somewhere far off, a small seal appeared on the ground as Grumori and Naruto flashed to the ground. A burst of demonic energy flew through the air as they did. Here Mao-sama, he said, and Naruto nodded. He remembered spending many years inside this structure holding meetings with Mika, her hosts, and some other beings. It was the Grand Court Council, and being one of its founders, Naruto had his certain privileges and rights to this court. It worked like this: if there was ever a problem to the realm between Kami and the Mao, then the 2 would discuss it with no less than 20 clans of beings present. If the 2 reached a stalemate, then they would fight and the winner would be the one who got their wish, the loser had to deal with it. Naruto remembers quite a few fights with Mika during that time. He had lost a few fights himself, but a majority he had won. The building was big, but there was no sign of any human civilization, which suited the blonde just fine. There was nothing significant about it other than that. It had a simple door, windows, and a couple of statues of angelic beings and demonic warriors. Truly though, it would have been a sight to behold if a human looked at it. Thank you, Grumori. Let's go, Naruto said, and Grumori quickly nodded while the same charismatic smile adorned his face. Naruto matched the smile and the 2 walked forward towards the building. Instantly the gates barred their entry and Naruto frowned. Stand back, Grumori, Naruto said, and Grumori quickly backed away while Mao held out his hand. Without a word, a large, red circle of Yuki appeared in front of his hand before he pushed his hand forward. With a small mutter, his hand thrusted to the gates. Quickly Grumori felt a large pressure blasted over the field. The force actually pushed him back while his hair flapped in the wind. He looked forward and watched the Mao stand without a thought. He narrowed his eyes before smirking. He could feel the gates resisting his presence and it irritated him, if only slightly. Naruto took a deep breath and his hand clenched before the gates were blasted off the ground and landed into the courtyard. Naruto withdrew his hand while Grumori took his place next to him. As amazing as ever, Mao-sama. I could have done it though, Grumori said while Naruto smiled. I know, but I have a lot of pent-up frustration that I need to release. You don't mind, do you? Naruto asked with a small, slightly insane grin while Grumori quickly tried to match it before he gave an elegant bow as one did to their king. Of course not, Mao-sama. I can understand the want to release frustration if I were in your place, Grumori said as he and Naruto walked inside. As the 2 took a step forward, they noticed a large beam of light heading for their forms. Naruto looked up at the minor annoyance before shaking his head. He held his hand into the air before he swung it across the sky. Quickly a wave of Yuki flowed from his arm in an arch and bashed into the beam of light, dispelling it simply. Grumori grinned while Naruto's glare deepened as 2 figures dropped to the ground. Halt! State your business here, one figure said. It was obviously a female. She was elegantly sculpted with a body most would be jealous of. She had light blonde hair that went down to her waist and she wore angelic armor with a sword and scabbard in her arm. She looked at Naruto sternly while Naruto looked back and chuckled. "Is that how things are done now, Gabriel-chan?" Naruto asked and the woman known as Gabriel frowned quickly before standing to her feet. "Era, do I know you?" she asked tilting her head to the side while Naruto closed his eyes and smirked while shaking his head. "Leave for more than 6 or 7 centuries and people easily forget you." How hurt Naruto felt at that. "You should. Let's see if I can make you remember," Naruto said as he took a deep breath. Gabriel watched as he closed his eyes for a few seconds. He then opened them and she quickly was on guard, but she gasped as he instantly disappeared. "Coochie coochie coo," Naruto said as his fingers quickly tickled Gabriel's body. The blonde woman's wings quickly sagged before she outright laughed, shocking her partner a great deal while Grimoire sighed to himself. "Aw, stop. Stop it," she laughed while Naruto grinned devilishly. "Stop it, Mao-sama," Gabriel cried in laughter before she widened her eyes. She felt all laughter drop from her voice while the tickling stopped. She turned around and stared at the blonde hair, blue eyes, and powerful aura. Naruto's eyes softened before he felt Gabriel envelop him tightly into a hug. "Mao-sama. Naruto-kun," she called while Naruto nodded quickly. "Gabriel, not that I'm not enjoying the hug, but could you let go? I'm carrying precious cargo," Naruto explained and Gabriel looked down at the still sleeping child in his arms. She raised an eyebrow, but quickly nodded and backed away. "Is it yours?" she asked and Naruto shook his head laughing. "No, but I guess she needs me so I'm gonna keep her." Gabriel says hello to Saya-chan, Naruto said and Gabriel quickly nodded while gently scratching the girl's cheek. "Gabriel-sama, is everything alright?" Naruto and Gabriel turned to the blonde angelic woman's partner while she quickly nodded. "Ah hi, stand down. I think our meeting's last person has arrived," Gabriel said and the partner just nodded slowly while Naruto smiled. "Arigato, Gabriel," the mouse said while Gabriel shook her head and smiled. "Right this way Mao-sama," she said and Naruto followed her while ushering for Grimoire to follow them. The man did without complaint as the three entered inside. "Mao-sama, where have you been?" Gabriel asked excitedly. Naruto smiled while rubbing the back of his head. "I believe I'll be telling that to everyone at the meeting so you might just have to stick around," he said and Gabriel nodded as they glided across the exquisite carpeting on the floor. Naruto didn't pay any attention to the interior of the rooms until he came to a large door. Right behind it was more than a dozen powerful presences that even made Grimoire wipe a bead of sweat from his face. Gabriel touched the doors and turned around. "Ready Mao-sama?" she asked and Naruto took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and the red ceiling looked very interesting for those seconds. He then looked down and steeled his eyes. "If you please," he said unconsciously, gripping Saya closer to his chest. He felt like he really should do this or she would be overcome by the presence there. Gabriel nodded and quickly pushed the doors open. Naruto and Grimoire walked through it as did Gabriel. Naruto didn't know what was supposed to be waiting for him, but he would get through it. He would go home before today ended and he would bring back the order that was no doubt distorted in Makai. It could be said that nothing truly surprised Ari. Being as old as she was then there wasn't much that she didn't see. When she had heard that her son had vanished, she had done exactly as Grimoire had said and had demons searching high and low for him all the while trying to keep their appearance hidden from the humans. It was hard and some ended in the deaths of a few, but Ari stood fast through them all. Every night that she had gone to sleep without knowing if her son was safe or if he wasn't there with her was another night her mind was close to insanity. She was sure that after this meeting she wouldn't be able to go on anymore. She had tried her best, but she was ready to stop. Without her son, she just didn't have it anymore. When those doors opened and she stopped talking with Cammy and her personal attendant, Michael, she froze. Cammy turned her head and widened her eyes in surprise, as did Michael. Everyone in the room from the Grand Council was laced with demonic, kingly pressure. Some gulped while others sweated. Tears ran down Ari's eyes while a hand covered her mouth. Her tails rose frantically and she was sure that she was close to hyperventilating. She covered her mouth with her hand as feet descended the stairs. She watched Naruto walk down the stairs with the powerful essence that only he could exude. Right behind him was Grimoire and Gabriel as the two descended the stairs with him. Naruto's eyes scanned through everyone before they settled on his mother. He gave a small smile while Cammy's eyes trailed over his form. There couldn't even be a doubt about it. This was indeed the Mao that they were searching for. No illusion could pull off the power that was more or less equal to her own. She gulped while Naruto stepped down to the center of the room and smiled. He turned his eyes to Cammy and she watched him smirk before turning to his mother. "Ka-san," Naruto said while Ari bit her lower lip. "Grimoire-san, if this is a joke then stop it." "I don't need this," Ari said, turning a glare to him, but she only saw Grimoire's smile widen before slowly shaking his head. She in her breath before standing to her feet. "Sochi?" she asked and Naruto nodded. He quickly shifted Saya as Ari crushed Naruto into her embrace. Her tails wrapped around his frame while Naruto's smile widened. "Sochi, Sochi, Sochi," Ari repeated as Naruto chuckled. She sobbed as Naruto whispered things into her ears. He gave her little pecks to the cheek that she enjoyed, all while using one of his fingers to scratch her own whisker marks, making her purr slightly. That, in combination with her cries, sounded very strange, but Naruto ignored them. Grimoire and Gabriel smirked from their sides of the room before Naruto whispered something to his mother. It was something that made her shiver, but she, very reluctantly, let him go and took the child in his arms into her own. She then walked away and stood next to Grimoire, all while keeping her eyes fixated on her son's form. "Will you be okay, Ari-sama?" Grimoire asked while Ari wiped her eyes. "I don't know. I think I might just faint. I'm so happy," she said, smiling widely for the first time in over half a century. Grimoire could easily share in her enthusiasm as he nodded his head and looked back. They noticed Naruto take his seat across from Cammy while placing an elbow on the table. "You've been gone a while," she said with a smirk on her face. "I'm gonna have to blame your predecessor's creations on that one. If anything, they have ingenuity. If one could hold me for a while," Naruto said, and Cammy's eyes blinked while multiple gasps could be heard. No one said anything while Cammy looked down at the table. "I see," she said, and Naruto nodded firmly. Yes, it was very strange that one of them, the one who invented their style of techniques, their jutsu using chakra, was actually also able to wield holy energy as well. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Naruto asked, and quickly all eyes were on Cammy and Michael as the two widened their eyes. Seeing that reaction, Naruto already realized the fact that they hadn't known, and that nullified his anger for the most part. "I am afraid that I did not know," she said regretfully and somewhat sorrowfully. Naruto stared at her for a few minutes before sighing as he shook his head. "Well, whatever. We'll discuss that later. Now then, tell me what this meeting is about," the Mao commanded, putting on a serious tone. Michael raised an eyebrow at the voice, but didn't say anything while Cammy pinched the bridge of her nose. "You can't seriously expect to just appear after 7 centuries and know all the things that have gone on in this world or the other realms, can you?" Cammy asked, and to her response Naruto just cracked a small smirk. "Try me," he returned, and he watched Cammy narrow her eyes at the tone. Light eyes stared at slitted ones as the two powerful beings matched each other's aura with ferocity. Most of the beings in the room shivered, but nothing more happened than that for them. Both Cammy and Mao seemed to understand that this didn't need any other people to be brought into it with the full extent that they were doing. Finally, Kami sighed and nodded as the pressure in the room quickly dissipated. Well then you know about the 4 great Satans? She asked with a smirk and Naruto returned it easily. Grimoire told me about it. I'll find out for myself if they're truly worthy of those titles myself. Sirich's Lucifer, Seraphal Leviathan, Ajuka Beelzebub, and Falbium Asmodeus, each of them were still kids when I saw them last, Naruto said and Kami nodded with a smile on her face. That really pulled everything together if it had to. She just seemed to have that way about with people. Hi, and they have only grown in power in the near millennium that you've been away. However, before we get to any other business, would you mind telling all of us where you were? She asked, and Naruto, for once, was actually more than happy to do it. Clearing his throat and placing his foot over his knee, Naruto spoke. He began his tale from leaving Makai to the point of meeting the sage. He spoke how Hagoromo used holy energy to sap his Yuki before sealing him into a pocket dimension that was strong enough to hold back his demonic essence for a substantial amount of time. He then told of his viewing of the human realm and most of its inhabitants until finally going to the point of his release when Minato Namikaze summoned the Shinigami to deal with Kyuubi, allowing for the Mao's release. Naruto then ended his tale with how he arrived here. You don't expect me to believe that, do you? Kami asked with a raised eyebrow, and if Naruto wasn't already calm with having his freedom and some other things back then, he would have gravely taken offense to that. Not only do I expect you to believe it, but I also expect you to remember just who you are addressing. I've been on this court a lot longer than you have, so I know that you know when I'm being serious. Don't think that just because I've been in a pocket dimension I have gotten weaker. No, in fact I think I might have just gotten stronger. I at least had the power to create a demonic clone, so I was easily able to train myself, Naruto said, and most gasped, but virtually tried to stay silent. I see. Well, there is nothing I can say for now. Due to recent developments and the coming of an investigation, we'll hold off on this meeting for 2 human weeks and then we will continue on our topic. Dismissed, Kami said, and beings began to file out of the room. Kami shot a smile to the Demon King before drifting off with Michael and Gabriel, offering one last hug, before they left as well. With the Grand Council dissipated, it left the Mao, Ari, and Grimoire alone. Naruto gasped as he felt his cloak jerked by a swift motion. He turned his head and he only noticed his body crashed into a crushing hug courtesy of his mother. Her 9 tails flew up and wrapped around his frame while she silently wept into his chest. Please, don't do that again. Baka Sochi, Ari said with a small smile on her face with her cheeks stained with water. Naruto frowned slightly before providing a small smile to his mother. I'm sorry for that, Ka-san. Thank you for what you did in my stead, Naruto said, and Ari quickly shook her head. It was no trouble at all. I'm just glad that you're all right, Ari said, using one of her tails to wipe her cheeks off. Naruto gently smiled before he took Saya from his mother's arms. Well, anyway, Ka-san, you were always the best with this. You smell the scent of Yuki on this child, don't you? Naruto asked, holding out his arms to the sleeping girl. Ari and Grimoire looked down to the child before Ari's nose sniffed the air and aura surrounding the child a little. Hi, it's faint, but somehow it's some of the strongest that I have ever seen in this current generation. Though it's unusual, I don't smell the blood of one of the vampire clans inside her. Neither the royal clans nor the servant clans. Where did you find her? Ari asked, and Naruto sighed with a shake of his head. In the human realm. Minato Namikaze was ready to sacrifice and seal the Kyuubi into her. Surprisingly, she looked like a boy when wrapped in a cloth, so I'm sure he didn't mean for it to really be a female since he called her a he. I was planning to just drop the kid off wherever, but the smell of Yuki stopped me, so I took her. Apparently she's an orphan, Naruto answered, and Grimoire placed a finger to his chin. Strangely, vampires have a natural strong respect for familial relations. Even the different clans think of themselves to be cousins, all coming from the first, which rumors from Yukai call it Kuro. I doubt that her parents left her, Rumori said, and Naruto nodded. Then it's more than likely that they were killed, Ari said sorrowfully. Rumori's face took on a hard expression and so did Naruto's. He looked down at the girl named Saya and watched her calmly grab his cloak with a small smile on her face as she did. Glancing back to his mother and his attendant, Naruto smiled. Well, nothing can be done about it now. We'll sort this out later. For now, she'll stay with me, Naruto claimed, and neither offered an argument. Now then, Grumori, take me home, Naruto ordered with a large grin. Grumori matched it before he waved his arm and bowed. As you wish, Mao-sama, he said. A large red circle appeared over where they were standing and the four figures were enveloped in a large light before they disappeared without a trace. The circle on the ground quickly dissipated just as easily with their disappearance. Makai. People conversed like normal. As far as the eye could see, Makai was littered with demons of all shapes and sizes. Shops were abundant and small children ran in the streets. Business and society went on as usual while Ari was the temporary Mao. However, it was already known, through hushed tongues, that Ari was nearing her breaking point. A lot of their forces had tried to find their original and first Mao. When news of his disappearance came to Makai, the realm was in a constant state of panic. The border patrols and military forces always tried their best to keep order, but without a real leader to refer to, then it was a lot more difficult than it obviously should have been. Crime, even in Makai, was on a steady rise as the trafficking of illegal elixirs, disappearances, beast awakenings, and rumored desecration of temples came to slowly be a growing thing. It was sufficient to say that over the past 6 centuries, Makai had become more than a little lawless while the first Mao was gone. Heavy debates were a common occurrence as people wondered who would lead them if Ari ever stopped. There was never a thought in anyone's mind over a second Mao, as they were sure that the second would never be able to compare to the first. However, Ari held long and hard to the position, often stating that she would leave only when her son came back to take his rightful place, but everyone could easily see that she was nearing the limits of her words. However, one good thing came out of the new changes. With the absence of the Mao, the military waned ever so slightly. So 3 members of the Mao's peerage, named the 3 Dark Lords, created the Yukai Academy. An institution built for the betterment of Yukai children. To teach them to harness their growing abilities, get them their familiars, and train to fight for Makai if a danger ever presented the realm. Akasha Bloodriver, Tenmei Mikogami, and Toho Fuai, were, and still are, members of the Mao's peerage looking after the school together, all while assisting Grumori in his tasks which were to aid Ari while she worked. It wasn't the best situation, but it wasn't the worst. However, in the history of Makai, no one in the realm was prepared for a thunderous shake of the ground beneath their feet. People dropped to the ground in shock while buildings cracked slightly. The clouds in the air shifted as purple lightning flashed through the skies. People gasped and widened in shock and fear. There was never a Yuki source this large before. It was as big as, no bigger than, their first Maos. Once the rumbling stopped, people turned to each other as they felt they weren't insane. Do you feel that? One siren asked and a Nekomata quickly nodded. Hi, there is no doubt about it, he said, balling his fists, the smile threatening to break his face in two. Mao-sama, people said and thought in unison. Within Makai there were a vast number of clans, just as there were a vast number of demons who populated the realms. Some royal, others ordinary or merchant-like, and the rest servants. No matter to them all, each and every house, manor, mansion, compound shook violently, stirring the members inside with a sense of dread before it became a wave of utter shock. Within one manor, a middle-aged looking man had just felt the tremor subside before he glared out the window firmly. His black hair glimmered in the candlelight as he stopped doing his paperwork and stood to his feet. His clap flapped slightly before a small smile appeared on his face. His ears perked up as he heard the sound of fast-running steps before the door to his room was opened. "To-san, did you feel that?" came the voice of one of his daughters. She had flaming red-orangish hair and green eyes. She wore a simple short kimono that showed off her still developing legs. The man's eyes narrowed before he closed his eyes and slowly nodded. "Kokoa, alert your sisters and your mother. The Shuzen family will be gone for most of the day," he said, and Kokoa nodded with a large grin on her face. "Who is that supposed to be?" she asked, and the man slowly grinned widely. "Our king," he said rather softly, but the girl named Kokoa heard him and frowned. "King? We have a king?" she asked, and the man turned to glare at her. "Yes we do, and the four of you are to be on your best behavior. This is a timeless friend of mine. Remember when I told the four of you that I am in a group with Grumori-san? That is Mao-sama's group. Come, we're leaving," he said, standing, and Kokoa just nodded as they walked off. She could easily see that the firm grin on her father's face never left as they did. Out in the fields, a large flash of light beamed down to the ground, easily creating a sizable crater before three figures landed on the ground, fourth in the arms of the third. The light dissipated quickly and Naruto slowly opened his eyes, taking in the sight of Makai once again. He smiled widely before taking a deep breath of the yuki-infested air before exhaling. "Good to be home, Datbeo," he exclaimed while Ari kissed his cheek and Grumori stood to his side. "I do believe I made it a little too flashy." "No doubt Makai felt that in your return," Grumori said, and Naruto turned to stare at him before chuckling. "I get the feeling that that's what you wanted." "Well, whatever, let's go," Naruto said, and with a kick of his feet he blurred forward with Grumori and Ari right behind him. Each of their feet were a blur, as was the surroundings in their eyes. Naruto clung to Saya tightly while his eyes steeled forward. He was home. He was finally home. Taking a leap into the air, feeling the wind in his face, Naruto took notice of the first town and backflipped through the air. Grinning widely, Naruto heard laughing as he looked down to see Saya clapping her hands happily. "Oh, so you like it when something goes crazy, huh?" he asked as he landed on the ground with a large thud, picking up dust. Demons and demonesses gathered around frantically while the smoke cleared, and they gasped when they saw Naruto glaring at them. He slowly stood to his feet and dusted off his attire. Maybe that was a little too much. Naruto stood in silence as people took in his presence. For them, there was no denying the defined whisker marks, steely blue eyes, and king-like attire that he wore. Of course, the fact that Ari and Grumori quickly appeared behind him was also a plus, but none were prepared for the next words. "Welcome home, Mao-sama," Grumori said purposefully. Each demon widened their eyes as they took in the feeling of his warm yuki. No one could ever explain why, but for demons, if they were ever near Naruto, then they felt a tremendous amount of warmth and feeling swell within their bodies. It was not a trait that could be passed on. "Good to be home," Naruto said and took a step forward. People just settled for staring at him wide-eyed. Sirens held their hands to their mouths, ogres chuckled while folding their massive arms, some children dropped their mouths in surprise, harpies in the air settled down on rooftops just blinking in surprise. It was tense. Naruto felt like just one footstep would set off the entire line of people in his way. The grin on his face lessened until it slowly disappeared. He knew that due to him having to pour a good portion of his powers into breaking for his release from the pocket dimension, he was just a little smaller, but the scale of his power only made anyone think twice that he was weak. Slowly, one by one, Naruto watched people drop to their knees and bow their heads to the ground in silence. The streets littered with people and Naruto's eyes narrowed. He then closed his eyes and gently smiled. "Forgive me for making you all wait for so long," his voice sounding like an ocean of calm rushing over everyone as most people couldn't keep the smiles off their faces. Questions, explanations and other things could wait for later. Right now, Everyone was too ecstatic to care. Swiftly, Naruto's eyes glanced to the right before three blurs appeared between him and the crowd. Each of them were already on one knee with their heads bowed in reverence. "Mao-sama, it is a pleasure to be in your presence once again," they said, and Naruto, carrying Saya, couldn't fold his arms like he might have wanted to. He turned back to his mother and Grumori noticed them nodding. He took a step forward and patted the leader on the arm. The person was a young female with pink hair and green eyes. The hair went down just to the tip of her waist and settled in a long ponytail. "You've had a rough time, haven't you, Akasha?" Naruto asked, and the young woman named Akasha looked up and briefly smiled. "Not at all, Mao-sama, it is always a pleasure to serve Makai's one true demon king. I swore my loyalty to you always," she said, and Naruto slowly nodded. "Thank you, Akasha," he said, stepping past her. He then patted two other shoulders. "Tenmei, Toho, you have both had a rough time, haven't you?" Naruto asked, and the two quickly shook their heads. "Not a problem, my lord. All is done to the glory and perseverance of Makai, my liege," came the voice of Tenmei. Naruto moved his head up and down approvingly. "I see," was what he said before walking through the crowd. The people opened up to allow him to walk while Akasha, Tenmei and Toho appeared behind him instantly. Ari and Grumori did the same. The crowd watched them go until there was nothing more to be seen. The silence was deafening for but a second before thunderous cheers were heard throughout the town. Leaving the town behind, Naruto and his group quickly made their way back to the blonde's mansion office. "Mao-sama, if I might be so bold. What happened to you?" The question came from Toho Fuai. Naruto turned his head back to cast a small glare which instantly caused Toho to recoil. "Forgive me, Mao-sama. If you do not wish to tell me, then you will not tell me," he said instantly before he noticed the smile on the blonde's face. Naruto shook his head left and right, claiming that it didn't bother him all that much. Watching his office come into view, Naruto began to speak. "Unfortunately, humans happened to me. Somehow the sage came into contact with holy energy. Very strong holy energy, I might add. It was strong enough to drain most of my yukai and seal me for those centuries," Naruto explained, and he watched Tenmei grunt. "Humans again. Truly, that race is trying our patience by attacking you. Why don't you have us deal with them?" Tenmei asked, and Naruto chuckled dryly, showing that the blonde demon king was very much not amused by his situation at all. In fact, it was downright embarrassing. Two simple reasons. "First, I will not condemn their race for his actions," Naruto said, holding up one finger. Everyone nodded, though Naruto could see that in at least two there was reason to dislike that side of his thinking, but they didn't voice it. "The second is because I will need to get back some things that are rightfully mine. Things that have been missed for the last time," Naruto said, his voice turning icy, sending shivers through everyone's spine. No one was sure what to think about that. "Akasha, this might seem unfair of me, but I need you to take a mission for me," Naruto said, and Akasha nodded quickly. "Hi, what is it you request, Mao-sama?" she asked, and Naruto glared forward. "I need you to do some surveillance on the human realm country, Kumogakure and then Kurigakure. Those are two places I am going to start with," Naruto said, and Akasha didn't even nod, her eyes already telling that she had accepted the mission. "Hi Mao-sama, is there anything else?" Akasha asked, and Naruto finally reached the stairs to his mansion before looking back. "Yes, tell me about this Yukai Academy that you three decided to build," Naruto said, and he noticed the three instantly looked sheepish while his smile widened. It was good to be back. Somewhere inside a cave in the human realm, 7 figures quickly appeared in the dark, however they could each see perfectly given their demonic, slitted eyes. "So, it's true. The Demon King truly has returned," one of them said, obviously masculine. "This is not good. We were able to proceed only because he was never here. When he disappeared we were able to move so much quicker than before." What are we going to do? You know that only holy energy works well against him, and last I checked none of us had that ability. Another voice, feminine, shouted until there was a loud snarl. This next voice was just as masculine, shaking the very structure of the caverns and whatever they're in. Be quiet, both of you. This changes nothing. Mao-sama was always a short-sighted fool. He could never take action against the human race because he was always scared of the reprimands. What kind of demon king cowers before the thought of those weaker than himself? He's better off wherever he's been the past 7 centuries. We do not need him. It's time to take back the place that was once ours. For centuries these humans have trampled on our bad names, cursing us, killing us off like animals. No more. If the Mao won't do it, then we will. He started firmly. The other two quickly nodded with grins to match his. The others nodded in turn before one of them finally sighed. Have you discovered it yet? The obvious leader of the group asked. Another shook his head, and that got a grumble from the leader. The Mao and Kami hid it away thousands of centuries ago. Who knows where it is or if it's even in the human realm. It could be in Makai, the human realm, or the outer realm. You know it would be impossible for us if it were in the outer realm, he said, and the leader sighed with a nod once again. Just find it, he said, and quickly everyone vanished without a trace to their existence. Konoha. Kushina sighed as she laid back on the hospital bed. It was time for rehabilitation, and though she was signed out of the hospital, she still had to use its facilities for her to have a clean bill of health to return to shinobi duty. After hours of her spilling her guts out to the Hokage as well as being briefed on all the things that went down, it was suffice to say that it all left the young Uzumaki positively drained for once. Ever since her birth, Kushina had always been energetic and hot-tempered. It was one of her more endearing qualities. However, the fact that she not only lost her best friend, but also the demon she was supposed to be protecting the world from, was easy enough for her to feel tired. Kushina thought back to the council's decision to label that man, Uzumaki Naruto, for a high bounty to bring him back to Konoha, preferably alive. Konoha couldn't risk the Kyuubi falling into anyone else's hands. Kushina could understand this all very clearly, as she didn't want some unknown person being the host of the nine-tailed demon fox as well, but she couldn't understand something. How did he even seal the Kyuubi into himself? Mito Bachan said that only a Uzumaki could hold back its power for over a long period of time. He claimed himself to be an Uzumaki, and yet, he says that we aren't who we say we are. Man, my head hurts, Databane. Kushina growled to herself. She snorted before she fell back to her bed and closed her eyes. Suddenly a knock came to her door, but Kushina really didn't feel like answering it. Whoever it was, hopefully they would just leave her alone. For her at the moment, focusing on her anger of this person rather than on her wallowing sadness was more productive, at least to her. The knocking came again, and finally the red-haired Uzumaki grumbled to herself. Go away, she called out, hoping whoever this was would leave her alone. That's no way to treat your best friend, Kushi-chan. Kushina opened her eyes to the sounds of a familiar voice before hearing the door open. She turned and noticed a raven-haired woman. She bore the symbol of the Uchiha crest on the back of her shirt. She also had onyx-colored eyes shaped in the forms of coal. A smile crept to the woman's face as Kushina leaned up. Makoto, how are you? Kushina asked, and Makoto shrugged her shoulders. Doing just fine, all things considered. I just got back from my mission. Imagine my surprise when I see the state our village is in. I also heard about Minato, Makoto said, and she saw the sullen look on Kushina's face. Yeah, they said that the funeral would be held in a few days and that the old man had taken back the Hokage position. It's going to be a while before Konoha gets back on its feet, Kushina said, trying to change the subject, which Makoto realized very easily. That would be the best thing for us at the moment. I heard that Kyuubi went on a rampage. So, is it still safe with you? Makoto asked and Kushina's head quickly dropped down slightly. No, it's not, she said and Makoto raised an eyebrow. So it has a different host? Makoto asked and Kushina nodded though it was rather hesitant which was something that Makoto noticed. Being a mother, Makoto was always able to pick up on those little hints, but it also helped that Kushina, in front of her friends, had a horrible poker face. Something like that. He calls himself Uzumaki Naruto, Kushina said and she was sure from the utterly shocked expression on Makoto's face that she was going to take this just as Kushina had taken it. Fish cake? Makoto asked. Despite the situation, Kushina cracked a smile on her face at the attempted joke and it was much appreciated. I'd rather believe that it's Maelstrom, Databane, Kushina commented, fathoming her best guess. The two women glanced at each other before they quickly shared a laugh. Really? Kushina, I'm so happy for you. I told you that you weren't alone. So, why don't you look happy? Makoto asked and Kushina snorted before she folded her arms. HMPH I don't he even is one. He could have just easily taken our name. I had the same reaction to his name, but broke any notion that claimed he and I were family. In fact, I could feel that he harbors a distinct, I wouldn't say hatred, more like disappointment or disapproval with our clan. He also called Kyuubi his son, Kushina said and now it was Makoto's turn to raise an eyebrow. Delusions of grandeur. Kyuubi shouldn't have a father should it? Makoto asked and Kushina shrugged her shoulders. I don't know Makoto, but he was there during the final moments between Minato and the Kyuubi. He knows something and I'm sure he has a hand to play in Minato's death. It shouldn't be long before we see him again I suspect. Hokage-sama said that he would put a bounty on him for his capture. Hopefully then, I'll get my questions answered, Kushina said while Makoto sat at the edge of the redhead's bed. Sighing, Makoto looked out the window at the destroyed village. Night already fell over it and she was sure that it would be busy tomorrow. Well, there is nothing more that can be done. If he's really as involved in this as you say and he's really hosting the Kyuubi then he'll turn up someday. Depending on a point of view, that's either good luck or bad luck for you, Makoto said and Kushina stuck her tongue out while the former stood to her feet and headed for the door. Say Makoto. Makoto looked back and noticed Kushina looking at the ground. What mission did you have? Kushina asked and Makoto's eyes suddenly slowly turned blank. I can't tell you that. S-rank secret, she said and Kushina just nodded before Makoto waved goodbye while Kushina waved back. The smile on her face vanished before she slipped herself underneath the hospital sheets and closed her eyes. Kami, Kushina hated hospitals. Makai. Night loomed over the demon realm, but it was just as masked by the bright streaks of light that stretched out for miles. Each town that was located in Makai reveled in celebration and hardly anyone didn't know why. The return of the Mao was the biggest event and talk throughout the realm in the last few hours. Demons roamed the streets with their families enjoying the festivities and century-old traditions that they grew up with. On top of his mansion, Naruto's upper body draped over one of the railing with a small cup full with madrin, a special demonic elixir-type drink used for festivities as well as the promotion of good health and strength. The blonde sighed and his eyes gleamed when he watched his people converse. Are you not going to join? Naruto just grinned, but didn't turn around as he already felt the familiar presence behind him. I'll save myself the trouble of being mobbed for now, Naruto said before he turned around and stared at each other. Naruto bore his gaze to his friend, head of the Shuzen family, Issa. The middle-aged looking vampire smirked holding a glass filled with red wine inside. It's good to see you again Mao-sama, Issa said with a standard bow and Naruto's grin widened. Good to be back, Issa. You haven't changed at all since I saw you last, Naruto complimented. Well, you certainly have. You have gotten just a tad shorter, Issa remarked while Naruto chuckled dryly. Whatever you say, jerk, Naruto returned with a small smile. Taking a step forward, Issa stood next to Naruto as they glared down at the festivities. Vazda has gone rogue, Issa said, dropping his news fast. Naruto's eyes instantly narrowed, there was a sign of disbelief in them, but that quickly vanished out. I see. Did the others go with him? Naruto asked. Hi, he said, and Naruto took a deep breath, his power flared slightly before he reined it in. Why? He asked. Isaac glanced in the blonde mouse's direction before looking back forward. We don't know, but we know that they are looking for the demon statue. The one you and Kami hid together, Issa responded. Naruto shook his head, but his eyes reflected grave seriousness as he fiddled his hands with his drink. I see, was what he said again, and Issa knew that this probably wasn't the best time to bring that forward, regretting it only slightly. Hi, he reaffirmed. Naruto closed his eyes for a few seconds before they heard another speak. Well, we will have to deal with them if they become a danger to our world. Everyone stands by you, Mao-sama. Both looked back and noticed Romori, Ari, carrying Saya, Akasha, Tenmei, and Toho walking forward. Naruto raised an eyebrow before chuckling slightly, taking Saya out of his mother's arms. I appreciate it. I feel I'll need all of you. Truly, there are no better people I feel I could be around than you guys, Naruto replied, and he watched Romori hold his glass to the air. To Mao-sama, he said, smirking, and everyone raised their glasses and cups as well. To the safety and continuation of Makai, Naruto said, and they cheered again before pushing their glasses together. The world was slowly spinning into motion, its events unraveling at the very seams. And that's the end of part 1. How did you like the beginning of this new story? Tell me in the comments, do you think Naruto as the ruler of Makai will change everything? If you want part 2, then please like this video and comment, next part. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. I'll see you in the next part. Take care, bye.